Hey, welcome to episode 40 of the Creative Train podcast. We're going to talk about earning respect in creative partnerships in this one. And this is something I face daily in my role as a music teacher, and I know it's very much the norm in any workplace or partnership. But it's the matter of earning respect, not demanding it or expecting it. Well, aside from basic human respect we should all have for each other. But this is about the teacher-student dynamic, which can lead to wonderful experiences if both parties do their part to create a positive learning environment. I'll recount some of my best and worst experiences on this. Have a listen. Let me know your own experiences in the comments. Let's have a discussion. We'll figure it all out. All aboard? For a very introverted kind of guy, I'm pretty much the opposite when I'm in teaching mode, because I want all of my students, regardless of their age or experience, to want to come every week to their guitar lesson or piano lesson or whatever we're doing that day. I want them to know that they can grow and see and hear their abilities evolve. And one way I do this is by making a point of pointing out every single improvement I witness, whether it's in real time or in retrospect a few moments after they perform something or play something. And things like playing with an even tempo and meter and with dynamics, which is one of the last things that any music student typically develops, can take from a few months to a few years before anything tangible really happens. But despite that, there are those with an innate talent for whom certain things just come easier. On the other side of that is that there are those who just don't seem to pick up those same things as quickly or as well, no matter how much they tell me they practiced. With the students that appreciate humor, I'll always make fun, playful remarks about their improvements and do the fist bump thing or a high five. And I can see in their face and their body language immediately that this gives them a charge. Maybe it's because they don't get such commendation at home, or maybe they're not so good in school and don't get recognized for any accomplishments. But when they're with me, my first goal is to educate, but tied very close to that is keeping things fun, or at least enjoyable. So how does this tie in with earning respect? I think that when a teacher, especially if there's a big age gap between the teacher and the student, when the teacher demonstrates an enjoyment of the time being spent together, then a tangible vibe of calm, friendly camaraderie becomes the flow or the current, and the students feel comfortable being in that vulnerable position of being a student. And this allows the teacher to deliver the lessons or information in a non-adversarial way. Because it's amazing how many younger kids, especially around the 6 to 9 year range, take any criticism or even demonstration of something, such as like a technique or even more fundamental things. They see that as being talked down to, and they take offense, and they let you know that they're offended. That they're offended that they're being taught something. I guess it's the age range when kids start to discover a lot of independence, and they're quite certain they're correct about everything. And I had one fella like that. He was 13 years old and super into hockey. All year round, he was in hockey development camps. So he was quite accustomed to the role of student teacher with his coach and their staff, and him being much younger and part of the team. But in the context of his piano lessons, he started to become quite adversarial, insisting that just because he's more comfortable using one finger for a scale, it's good enough, and I should just let him be that way and not watch him. And this became the baseline for his behavior. Something happened that over a 3-week period where he seemed to decide that my input really wasn't needed or even welcomed. So I asked him in the presence of his mom during one of the lessons, I said, "Do you talk to your hockey coaches that way? Like telling them that you're already good enough and don't really need their guidance or anything?" And his mom looked up, slightly taken aback that I would talk to her little angel in such a tone. But I had to lay it on the line that he's coming to learn from me, and I'm there to teach him what he wants to know, because apparently he was asking for piano lessons 2 years prior to him starting. So in a lighter tone, I told him, okay, I've been teaching longer than you've been alive, so maybe just give me a chance to offer some guidance. But that was a no-go. And this is where I found that line between the teacher being nice and friendly and humorous was seen as a sign that he doesn't need to respect me. That maybe because I'm not the heavy guy or the ominous type of teacher who yells and slams things and blows whistles, because I'm not that type of teacher, he doesn't even need to take me seriously. So, backstory a little bit. To be granted this teaching position, I had to endure a week of online DEI courses. They were exhausting in their utter ridiculousness and completely out of touch with what actually happens and works in a teaching situation. The course was more concerned with how I would choose to use someone's pronouns rather than anything about my teaching ability or credentials. Anyway, part of that training was how to avoid burnout and hardening oneself off to, disobedient or recalcitrant kids, the problem kids. Their solution, the most correct answer in the multiple choice test, was that I should always seek to accommodate each student's needs for their education by changing my approach, which I did and always do, but just not in the way that they thought I should. Their suggestion was to offer a more compliant tone, that I should allow the student to demonstrate how they like to be spoken to and addressed. And for me, that is a no-go. That method only perpetuates that behavior by allowing the student to assume control of the lesson time and ultimately utterly waste it by complaining. And it ended up being him complaining about everything that I was trying to show him was beyond him, and I should just stop asking. So he would ask me at the end of his session, what am I supposed to practice this week then? And his mom would stand beside him with an also inquisitive look with her head to one side, looking at me. And the only thing I could say is that he managed to waste our entire session complaining about how I'm too strict with him. And he actually only barely touched the piano, so we never really got down to anything of the lesson material that I had planned for him. He would refuse to even try the lesson books that his mom bought for him. He outright refused to try any of the rudimentary exercises I've devised over the last 35 years, saying that they're too hard for him, even before he tried. He would not offer any idea of exactly what he would like to learn to make his lessons maybe more interesting. He literally just sat there, mucking around and muttering about me and my teaching methods and how it's all too hard. And not once did his mom tell him to smarten up or pay attention or even try. I think it was after about a month of this, I suggested a change for him. And I suggested that he try having lessons with a younger, less experienced teacher who he might find a little less onerous to deal with. And he did. He lasted 2 weeks and was never seen or heard from again. Now, that is a totally worst case scenario about me just having someone totally check out on me. I think I've maybe had 5 people like that in my 35 years of teaching. So out of about 50-some thousand private sessions, I think that's pretty good. Yeah. But it's also an example of how being too casual can lead to a loss of respect in the eyes of your students. They look at you as a pushover and not as someone in any position of authority or even worthy of their respect. And for some of us, it's not in our nature to try to assert dominance or portray ourselves as being superior. But there are also those who, unless this side is shown to them, will put us down as an easy mark and feel like they can play some weird game of defiance and disrespect. Because I treat every single student as an individual with different expectations and goals, I always make an effort to get to know them as an individual, as a person as well. The position of a student can leave you feeling vulnerable and insecure, like not wanting to look foolish in the eyes or the ears of your teacher. We have to make every reasonable effort to get to know our students as people. Now, I don't mean following them on social media or anything like that. If that happens, whatever. But try to get to know their hobbies, a bit about their family, their pets, light stuff that you can talk about. I always ask my younger students, what was the best thing that happened for you since we were together last? And this is always met with a smile. And after a few weeks or months, each of those folks starts coming into their lesson anticipating telling me their good news story, which totally changes their outlook on our time spent in a lesson context because they know they're going to get a voice. It's not just going to be me sitting there droning about music theory and technique. And this goes back to that last episode about the Charlie Brown teacher. Wah, 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 wah. These students come to class already focused on the good things that they can talk about. And if they haven't really been any good, significant things that happen, or maybe even some really bad things happen, they know that playing a bit of music will always help lighten the mood. Because there's been days when I don't feel like going to work. Either I had a bad sleep, or I have too much to do at home, or maybe feeling pissed off that the band I played in for 10 years somehow seemed to reform after a brief pause, changed their name, and didn't include me in any of their plans going forward. Yeah, maybe that's an episode about more toxic relationships and creative partnerships. Yeah, I tried not to be pissed off for a while, but it didn't happen. So those things about the good news stories, I bring those up with the young kids because they're always super excited to talk. If I ask, like the teens or the young adults or the folks that are around my age about that, I think it's not something that they expect to talk about with somebody who is a teacher, quote unquote. And it catches them off guard. And they'll usually just say, same shit, different day, that kind of thing. But it's really a great way to do it. And if you haven't tried that, it's worth popping that question in once in a while to see the reaction. So I know that after a few minutes of switching into teacher mode, everything will soon even out, emotion-wise, if I'm having a bad day, or if the kids are having a bad day, right? They can do some music and the switch goes. And even after my wife passed away from cancer in 2017, I only took 3 days off work because I actually needed the creative therapy of playing music outside of my house to help me get my head and my heart and my life back on track. Some would say this is callous or reactionary on my part, that I should have allowed myself more time off to mourn longer or whatever. But it's not that I went back to work because I needed a distraction. I went back to work because as a musician, I needed to get back in touch with my creative self and not allow my mournful self to keep control of the reins any longer. So music helped, saved my life. Anyway, moving along. As for setting or trying to set a respectful or collaborative tone with new students, I'll always let them know that we are like partners in this relationship, and we will earn each other's respect over time by working together. My side of the arrangement is to deliver appropriate, timely, detailed information and inspiration. And their side of the arrangement is to try to work on these things, like learning an instrument, as best as they can. And I'll let it be known very clearly that we will earn each other's respect by working together. Obviously, this is not something I can say in so many words to like a 4 or a 5-year-old, but I let them know in no uncertain way when they're doing well. I always congratulate them. And when they need some guidance, I'll deke in there a little bit, and you give the pointers with a little bit of a chuckle in your voice, and they get it. It eases them, right? So I always tell them when they're doing well and maybe when or how they need to try and focus a little harder on something. One young fella, this guy's great, he turned 6 this year, and he's been with me for almost 2 years now. So at first, piano lessons, or really any instrument lessons, whatever, but piano lessons for him. It's more about discovering the instrument and starting to recognize patterns of the black keys and the white keys, maybe learning some note names, funny melodies or something like that. It's not necessarily about making music for the first while. That is for sure. But he was super excited at first and then started slacking off when he started to get more familiar with me and realized that I'm not an ogre. And it got to the point where I actually emailed his mom and asked if she could sit in on some, if not all, future lessons, because he, over a period of weeks again, completely checked out on me. And I can't do anything to regain his attention at this point. Nothing. So she did. She was very contrite for her son's behavior, and I let her know that it's not uncommon, but I can usually wrangle them back in, so to speak, if things get too far gone. But this wasn't the case, as we had completely wasted 2 sessions of him laying on the floor and trying to play with every single thing in my studio except the piano. One day he came in and he said that he'd like to learn the theme from one of his favorite video games. And I told him, yeah, I know how to play it. It's kind of tough. So you're going to really need to have to work hard at it if you want to get it. And he agreed. And 2 weeks into learning the piece, he told me he practiced 10 minutes every day. And his performance of it really showed. And I high-fived him and told him that he was my student of the day. And when his lesson was over, he and his mom were walking down the hall from the studio. And I actually heard him say, "Mom, I can't believe Mark said I did so good." And his mom had the perfect response to that when she said, "It's because you actually practiced and he could tell." The next week, I told him that I heard a little bit of their conversation when he was leaving the week before, and I told him that I was really proud of him for taking his practice seriously, and I felt that he's ready for the next level of learning the song, like letting things get a little bit more complex by using both hands now. This was like fuel on his newly found fire, and he was focused like a laser beam for 30 minutes. When the lesson time was up, he was shocked at how fast the lesson went. He didn't believe me that 30 minutes had passed because there were no distractions, no wandering around the room. He was just focused and learning. And he was totally focused on taking the next challenge and proving himself to me. I didn't act like any ogre to him. All I did was encourage him. Now, this is about 5 months ago. And since that piece was completed, he's totally refocused back into learning to read music, and he's even trying to sing. And all it took was a bit of reciprocal effort on his part by working on the things that I gave him and finding success by actually doing the thing. I encouraged him, and in turn, he encouraged me by eliminating any doubt about his dedication that I was starting to have. When the student-teacher dynamic starts to take this kind of form, the doors of potential fly wide open because the student knows that their efforts will be noticed, and the teacher knows that their efforts will be noticed and acknowledged and honored through practice. The long and the short of it here is that it takes a lot of practice to become a good musician, or whatever. And it also takes a lot of practice to become a good teacher. You don't just show up with your diploma in hand and expect to change the world. Teaching has to be a passion. If you're in the industry because you want to have a union gig with paid time off and lengthy summer holidays, then you're definitely in it for the wrong reasons. But if you're a teacher because you're passionate about helping others not only learn things, but find new levels of confidence, insight, creativity, and understanding, then you are totally in the right place. There's your pep talk. Now go get to work. I know this episode comes in on the heels of the last one regarding creative teaching methods, and they're kind of similar, but it's something that I think many teachers lose track of, and that's the why factor of their choice of career. If we can approach every teaching situation as a learning situation for us as well, our willingness to express compassion and criticism in a positive manner will not only keep the student-teacher dynamic appropriately balanced, but it will lead to a deeper, if even subconscious, understanding of the respect for the student and an openness to expressing joy in their accomplishments, but also for the student to allow themselves that vulnerability by immersing themselves in the flow of learning and honoring their teacher's efforts. Respect goes both ways.